So today's title is Double Hamburgers and Cheese Level of Corny, but go big or go home, right? And in the spirit of the current political discourse, this episode of the reality show is going to be the best the internet has ever seen. So with both Trump and Harris appearing in separate interviews on the same network, who outfoxed whom? What did we learn about the candidates, the race, the state of America today, and its prospects for tomorrow?
We are joined today by Jonathan and Michael. Hi, guys.
Hey,
Um, Jonathan, I'm going to you first. How did you like the interviews? Did you enjoy the gruesome spectacle of the two guys, the two candidates, not facing each other, but kind of having to respond to a few questions?
I haven't
How
enjoyed it. No, great to be with you and great to see our international audience. We want them to chime in on this. This is something certainly everyone has an opinion on. I haven't enjoyed anything about this election. It's been not only a gruesome spectacle, but as someone who worked very hard on a book about what Miss Rand understood and thought about Americanism, to see the candidates for president of America who both are so far away from the basic principles of individualism, individual rights, Americanism that Miss Rand enunciates, very difficult. I mean, we'll get into it certainly, but the two things I've noticed that were most interesting weren't even the interviews. These candidates come prepared; they know the sound bites they're going to say, but the reactions, because both sides, we're such a tribal era now. Everyone's clinging to his and her side. Both sides thought that their candidate, of course, won their respective interviews. So it's kind of a great example of like two people watch the same interview and have a completely different interpretation of it. Today, what my hope is to share some of what Miss Rand thought about voting, and certainly voting in the American system. This was a comment she made in the 1976 lecture course. And I just want to throw this out there at the top for those who think that they have to choose a side, they have to pick one of these lesser of two evils. Ms. Rand wrote, and I'll quote, or she said, and this is from the lecture course: you should vote only so long as you think a candidate has more virtues than flaws. But if you regard both candidates as evil, do not choose the lesser evil. Simply don't vote. For instance, I abstained in 1952 and 1956. I didn't vote for Eisenhower or Stevenson, despite everything we hear to the contrary. Abstaining, particularly by people who understand the issues, is a form of voting. You're choosing none of the above. So I'll just throw that out there as we compare two, what did they say, a shit sandwich and a turd buffet that evidenced in these various interviews.
I think that's what we should have called the episode now. Michael, your thoughts?
Well, look, I agree with 99% of what Ayn Rand writes. And I think I think she was the smartest philosopher possibly ever. But certainly the most rational one. And as a scientist and a doctor, it is hard for me to understand how anyone could come up with anything else except what follows from reality. And the fact that she's called objectivism and that's considered objectionable is remarkable, right? So I generally agree with her. I think there is a pragmatic thing, and I think possibly the Electoral College has become so skewed by states in America that her comments are not necessarily accurate I would argue within the objective reality of the way voting works in America. I mean, we have a handful, probably maybe up to 10 states now that are toss-ups, and they need to go one way or the other. And the problem with her argument is if enough of them go the wrong way, whichever way you think that is, then you could end up with the more evil candidate. I personally don't think I don't believe that Trump's evilness is worse than his virtues. I believe that his virtues do outweigh his evilness. I think his mouth is ridiculous. I think his belief systems are generally difficult. I mean, I don't know what they are. I don't know if there are any, but I tell you, his actions when he was president, we had a very excited country. We had a positive country. We had a country that the average working person here and the average American could go around the world and say, we are proud of being Americans. We were energy independent. We weren't begging. I mean, we're begging for oil from Venezuela now. Have you ever heard of such ridiculousness? One of the worst polluters in the world. This is all due to because of the climate change. And we could go on and on. We have no border in this country. We have no criminal law. I mean, people are committing crimes. They're being let out of jail, and the states are following. And Donald Trump put a stop to a lot of it. The last point, of course, is that Trump stood up for Israel, and he didn't end up with every statement about Israel with a yeah, but. And I think overall Trump's actions were far better than his speeches. Really, the guy is tough to listen to, and it was hard for me to even watch most of the interviews because they're absurd. Most of it's absurd. But his policies that he enacted and his attempts to help American businesses, he reduced taxes and so on. I think they were all generally good. Kamala Harris, I think she's a total disaster. First of all, the woman she can't answer any question. And I understand what she stands for by her actions, not showing up to Netanyahu's speech, voting against Israeli things.
Let me ask, just to jump in quickly, we're talking about the interviews today. Ms. Harris, or Vice President Harris, was on Fox. She answered some questions there. What did you think of her responses?
I didn't think they were responses. I mean, I don't think Brett Baier, who did the interview, thought they were responses either. They were word salad. I mean, all we heard was everything was Donald Trump's fault, including for the last 3.5 years. Right? That's what she kept saying. Donald Trump's been campaigning for the last 8 years. But Brett would say, it's been your administration for the last 3.5 years. Yeah, but Donald Trump, it's his fault because he's been out there basically putting his foot in the milk. So I don't think she didn't even apologize to the woman whose daughter was killed by an illegal immigrant who was a murderer, who came and murdered this woman's daughter. And she said she feels bad for the woman, but she didn't apologize for the policy that was a Biden-Harris policy on day 2, I think it was, of their administration. So I thought she was absurd. And I don't think she had any answers to anything or any ideas to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, I was slightly annoyed by the opening question. It was about immigration. I mean, you go onto a channel, a network, which is obviously pro-Trump, or at least not pro-Biden or pro-Harris, whatever. And you are not prepared to actually give an exhaustive or at least convincing answer to give to the audience of that particular network. So you're there to try and swing some of the opinions away from the kind of people who watch Fox News. But she didn't do that. In fact, even worse, she did the typical thing, which is straight out of a famous comedy series here in Britain called Yes Minister, Yes Prime Minister. But which she started the question with, yeah, thank you. It's a very important question because we take it very seriously. And it's a very important question. It needs to be asked. And she didn't address the issue at all. She's done this a couple of times. She was wholly unprepared. And I was quite annoyed when at one point, she blamed Trump for not taking responsibility for his actions while he was president. And at the same time, she was trying to divert attention from what they did or didn't do in the case of Israel in the current administration, which is quite staggeringly bad.
I think there are a number of questions that arise from the fact that these two interviews existed in the way they did in the first place. I mean, for example, there's Harris appearing on Fox for this kind of interview without her potential vice president as a babysitter. So she's on her own. And she's there for a mere 25 minutes, which in comparison to debates that we have in the UK between the top leaders, they're often 2-hour affairs, or at least an hour and a half debating between candidates.
I'm just saying, I'm not taking any sides in this. I almost feel like, if we're going to start to get into debating the merits of these candidates, that Thomas Aquinas quote, to one who has faith, no explanation is necessary. To one without faith, no explanation is possible. I kind of feel like that's these days with candidates. Like, people who support one candidate, you're not going to be able to change that perspective. I guess the one thing I would think is, don't be afraid to perhaps think, I guess, a little independently. And I'm not saying this is any of our panelists here, but then what you might think you as a student of objectivism or anything else might think. Miss Rand is always associated with Ronald Reagan, right? Oh, Ayn Rand, the Ronald Reagan candidate. Harry Binswanger told this story. I'm sharing the quote, and Robert and Marco, correct me if I got this wrong. Harry Binswanger told a story that Miss Rand in the early 80s said to her cabal of students, or certainly to Harry, any of you who vote for Reagan, I will come back and haunt you from the grave. So she was vehemently against Reagan, which surprises a lot of people who are interested in objectivism or learning about Miss Rand. It was a number of reasons, abortion especially. So, don't be afraid, I think, to think outside what you think is your box when you're determining who to vote for or not to vote in this election.
Yeah. And in the case of Trump, it was a town hall, but it's a kind of town hall where you actually handpick the people, and there wasn't much opposition to Trump himself. I'd much rather have the kind of town hall with people with, pitchforks and torches ready to, really ask the difficult question. But we haven't seen this on either side. And, as the introduction pointed out before, is this really the best America can offer?
I mean, my view is that I would kind of want the impossible. I would want both candidates to win so that both of their sets of supporters can see how terrible they are in office, and you can see how terrible the opposition are in office, rather than having them completely given a white sheet because they don't demonstrate by losing how awful they would have been. Now, obviously, that can't happen. So,
Mark, you see, is this the best America, has to offer? And, Rand has another great quote that I trot out every couple of years, as she says, elections are won every month of the year except November. My interpretation is that, politics is downstream from ideas. What are we talking about here? Every day is Ayn Rand's ideas. So, Dr. Brooks says this all the time. We get the candidates we deserve. The American sense of life, I think, is terrible now. The American sense of politics is abysmal. And that's why we get these complete, it's not even altruists, it's just pragmatists. I mean, that's what worries me even more. Michael, you said something like, you don't know if Trump has ideas. That, to me, worries me more than Kamala's, collectivism or whatever it is. The amorality, the ability to switch and be on every side of every issue, to me, is the most terrifying. What say you?
Yeah, look, I understand that argument, and I definitely, just for the record, I think his Supreme Court scuttling and sorry to get into the details, but you asked about the ideas these people have. I mean, Trump's handling of abortion is abysmal and completely hypocritical. The man is a pig. The man probably impregnated many women. You could bet on it. He was terrible. But the point is, his policies are absurd, and they're contrary to what he started off in his life. And he just became a true Republican so that he could get more to the right and more to this crap. I understand, and believe me, I've had many discussions with many objectivists about who don't want to vote for Trump and therefore don't vote. I don't think that's a good thing. I disagree strongly with Ayn Rand on this, partly because I think Trump, net for the world, I think Trump is a good thing for the world, given that there's no other candidate. I completely agree with Marco and Richard, and I know you guys are there, and I think Jonathan and I share the embarrassment as Americans that this is, quote, the best we can do. It's not the best we can do. I mean, Kamala Harris became the candidate without a primary. Let's not forget that. Trump became the candidate because he screams louder than anybody else. And for some reason, somebody with a brain who has beliefs and has shown it, like Nikki Haley or something like that, just couldn't garner enough support in this old boys network of what is largely the Republican Party. And I guess they just couldn't make it. But they are what we have. And I think part of objectivism is I take her point, but you do have to deal with what you have. We all wish it were different. And I understand your point, Jonathan, that not having any ideas are better. But a reflex that says barbarians that are sitting there with a totalitarian dictatorship that want to kill the great Satan and the little Satan are worse than the people that are being attacked. That, I don't know if that's an idea or what, or a reflex for Trump. Or he just hates Islamic militants. I don't know. But to some extent, as a pragmatist, I don't care if it's because he hates Islamic militants in general, or he just believes that terrorists are bad people, unlike most of the students or many of the students at Harvard and Columbia and so on. Okay. But I think we have to go at that. Kamala has never, ever, to my knowledge, said that the terrorists are horrendous and so on. She can be a collectivist, she can be an altruist, she can be a whateverist. But I never heard an actual policy thought out of her mouth. I never heard any. Frankly, she's word salad. I'm going to bring joy to the presidency and America. I'm going to bring joy to it. It's going to be a happy time.
See,
and that's my problem.
During the Obama era, there was a lot of people when Obama was elected who were scared shitless that Obama was going to bring this immense collectivism, and everything they were saying about Vice President Harris, they were saying Obama, he's a socialist. And the part of the beauty of the American system is checks and balances. So we had a very leftist Obama, but we had as again, Dr. Brooke always points out, the Republicans were a great opposition party. And this is why, for me at least, I don't fear too much one particular bad president or leftist president if we have a system of checks and balances, which we do. Can I share one of Ms. Rand's perspectives on this? Because kind of what you were saying about, she wrote, and this is from the Objectivist newsletter in 1964, one cannot expect nor it is necessary to agree with a candidate's total philosophy, only with his political philosophy, and only in terms of essentials. ... I'm going to let everyone read this, but to me, this was the fundamental thing. It is the basic and today the only issue on which a candidate must be judged. Freedom versus statism. Will he protect freedom or destroy the last of it? Will he accelerate, delay, or stop the march towards statism? I mean, are we so sure that Kamala Harris will hasten the march towards statism and Trump will slow it?
Aren't all fears overblown when it comes to campaigning about saying how dreadful the other guy is? Isn't that just the nature of every 4 years?
You mean kind of painting of how horrible? Well, I mean, isn't Trump kind of a master of this? Kamala Harris, somehow a communist, statist, fascist, globalist, throw it all out there, see if it sticks. Talk about a word salad. I don't know.
Absolutely. Let me just do a couple of super chats just whilst we've got a chance, because we had a late one come in on the Daily Objective just before this show from Tragedy and Comedy. So thank you very much for that. Who said a beer? Could you scroll up? It just vanished for me. A beer for the 19-year-olds who killed Sinwar. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Tragedy and Comedy. And we've got another question. This one technically not a super chat, but it's worth raising. It comes from a YouTube member. So thank you, Race, for being a member and for your question, who says, here's a serious question. Do you think the GOP will learn from the mistake of passing over Haley for Trump if he loses?
Wow.
So,
I don't think I think he won't be in the next election because I think he'll be too old. And I think hopefully the GOP will have learned, but they didn't learn this time. It's shocking to me that they did. He lost the last election against a fuddy-dud. I mean, before we knew that he was demented, before we knew that Biden was demented, poor guy. But they still let Trump move ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And it's a bit crazy if you think about it, because at least the Democrats had the sense to tell Joe that he's too old and he's declining. At least they realized he couldn't do it.
Well, and what will the GOP look like? Who the hell knows? I mean, today GOP is, in my opinion, completely unrecognizable in terms of issues and policy and perspectives than even certainly 10 years ago. And again, must read is Miss Rand's article from 1962. I mean, we don't like to use that term prophetic because it's got kind of a mystical perspective, but she saw the creep of religion, altruism, and penned this radio address wrote this article in 1962, Conservatum and Obituary, which basically foresaw the complete disintegration of the Republican Party, which, I mean, Michael, I know who you're voting for, but you have to agree with it. It's a clown.
I completely, Jonathan, please, and I don't apologize for who I'm voting for, but I absolutely agree with you. The GOP it's a disaster, and I would just add one other thing, because when Trump says "Make America Great Again," it really feeds into what you just said. It's this statism, it's this kind of collectivist, it's this anti-everything. there is an aspect of Make America Great Again or America First or whatever, which is basically to say, let's take care of our taxpayers first. And I'm not trying to mush Trump's global ideas, but I don't think Trump wants to go out and take out Taiwan the way China does, or take out Ukraine the way Russia does, or blow up the free world like Iran does, or North Korea wants to annihilate South Korea. I don't think Trump is that crazy. I really don't. But when he says make America great again, I think he does want to take care of this country. And I think he stands up for this country and the taxpayers in it. I understand why people are concerned he goes too far, and I get that. I also think that's why we have a Congress and so on, like you said. But what I don't see is a world where Kamala Harris will raise the taxes. I will pay more money to get less from the government. She will. She already said she would. If the Senate and the House can pass it, it will happen. Okay. She will give back student loans, billions of dollars. She'll do a lot of that stuff that she's talking about. On the world stage, and I think that's where I am most concerned about Kamala Harris. She is, I believe, a wimp. She's an amateur. She's a flake. And I don't see how she can go up against she or Putin or any of the crazies or Ayatollah that are running the evil side of this world.
Enric, who gave us a super chat, and he's a YouTube member. And we need you. We've got 75 people watching. Smash the like button. It's because of you who are our supporters that the Ayn Rand Center UK is able to provide 7 days a week of perspectives influenced by Ayn Rand's objectivism. We're all students of objectivism, but we bring you some of the smartest minds. I mean, my God, I can't even list them here. There's so many, but everyday perspective and your participation. So participate with us. Michael, to your point about taxes, Enric asks, what would be the American economic result if Trump implements tariffs he proposes up to 200%? So again, devil's advocate here. I saw an estimate that people's household cost could something between $2,500 and $7,500 if Trump, who says tariffs are his favorite word now. I mean, that is I don't know, like if Bernie Sanders said that would be pretty, you'd expect that, right? Not from someone who claims to love the free market.
Michael,
no, I don't think Trump loves the free market. I'll be very short on this. I think Trump loves America and loves to tell his base that he's going to do everything to prevent foreign competition, and they can just go and do their thing. And again, this is a place where Trump is a disaster. It's absurd. Net, I still come out on him than her. And I will tell you from my pocket is better off under the Trump tax plan. What was the Trump tax plan, not what's expiring. My inheritance is better under Trump, which is expiring next year, what it was and is expiring because of Biden next year. And I don't like paying student debt back and so on and so forth. So we can all pick and choose. Go ahead. I'll talk too long. Go ahead.
No problem.
Well, can I share what Dr. Peikoff, who's been, pretty vocal about who he likes politically, but this is a great quote I remember from 2008. This whole thing of do you have to vote? And do you have to pick a side? In 2008, Dr. Peikoff refused to vote for either major party's ticket. This is such a great line, saying that John McCain comes across as a tired moron, Barack Obama a lying phony, Joe Biden a hilarious windbag, and Sarah Palin an opportunist struggling to learn how to become a moron, phony, and windbag. It's just frigging classic Dr. Peikoff here. He didn't like any of them. He didn't vote for any of them.
Absolutely awesome. And Ginger has suggested another thing you can check out, which is Ayn Rand's essay in the Objectivist newsletter from March 1964, the one called How to Judge a Political Candidate. This gives you an idea of how to think about the problem. So thank you for your super chat, Ginger, and for that suggestion. A very good one.
What I find particularly depressing is that it's become a personality contest. And the problem here, despite the fact that the two parties are kind of, there is a a fact paper, a cigarette paper between the two of them in terms of policies. They're not that different. We see in Europe, we see in the United States. It's effectively, a uniparty kind of thing. You have a few things around the edges that differ, but largely, statism is taken for granted. Welfare is never challenged, and of course, some things like foreign policy, for example, is definitely better on the Trump side than it is on the Harris side. Harris would probably do a deal with Iran, would probably continue the Obama deal with Iran. And you can kind of tell already by how they are telling Israel not to upset them too much, because they might put them in a bad mood for a deal. And that's worrying. But on the other hand, Trump is also, I mean, his energy policy, to be fair, had Iran on its knees. If they carried on like that, they would have put them on their knees.
They'd be gone.
Yeah, I was just saying
their revolt would have happened. They had no money left, and they certainly couldn't arm Hezbollah and Hamas the way they have, and Houthis, and Iran, and Iraq, and Syria. It's I don't know. It's inexcusable to me what Biden and Harris have allowed to occur in Iran. There's nothing pro-American about that at all. In fact, it's completely anti-American, in my opinion. Forget about Israel.
Can I share? We have a little bit of that article that Ginger mentioned, and it's very small, and I apologize about it. Maybe I can, does that help at all? Can I read this quickly?
Of course.
Miss Rand from 1964, if a candidate evades, equivocates, and hides his stand under a junk heap of random concretes, we must add up those concretes and judge him accordingly. If his stand is mixed, we must evaluate it by asking, will he protect freedom or destroy the last of it? Will he accelerate, delay, or stop the march towards statism? And she says, by this standard, we see why Barry Goldwater is the best candidate in the field today. In an age of moral collapse like the present, men who seek power for power's sake rise to leadership everywhere on earth and destroy one country after another. Barry Goldwater is singularly devoid of power lust. Even his antagonists admit it with grudging respect. He's seeking not to rule, but to liberate our country. I mean, is that Trump or Harris? Are they devoid of power lust? They love power lust. That's what they want. That's what's fucking disgusting, is that they don't care what they support. They want power.
And because there is no Barry Goldwater in this fight or any kind of equivalent, and because the answer to both of them, when you're trying to work out what their opinion is on anything, is really, I don't know, but I kind of think they're probably a bit in this direction on that. It makes it very hard to come up with a definitive response to who to vote for in that particular case, doesn't it?
I mean, I've said it a number of times, I'm glad I don't have to vote on this one, because it really, really rattled my brain. The only thing that I can say by looking at the two interviews is the kind of sense of life that comes across from the two. Harris is very much stiff. She doesn't, you can tell she cares more about power. She cares about anything else. She just wants to be the non-white woman president and take it from there, really. While Trump, yes, he's effectively a Democrat. He's from New York. He's just pretended to be a Republican because it suits being, the Republican candidate. You pretend to be a Republican. And as I said earlier on, they both agree on statism, and probably neither of them would actually move us towards a place where the state has got a smaller role. But the kind of sense of life that the Trump kind of projects is, as Michael was saying, it's about, he does care about American status. Perhaps he doesn't. He does certainly.
I don't see that at all. And I've watched this closely every day since the beginning for 20 years. I don't see it. You see it. I just don't see it. I don't see.
Well, let me put it this way. He sees, maybe you see, Jonathan, you see Trump as caring about Trump and his macho, the projection of America is onto him in a lot of ways, the way Netanyahu thinks that Israel only exists because of Netanyahu. I'm okay with that. What I am not okay, frankly, I'm not okay for an apologist. I don't think Kamala loves this country. I don't think she loves America. I don't think she respects America. I don't think she believes that what we've achieved is amazing. And I don't think that she even believes in the West.
Can I just, and again,
Sure.
sorry, I should have, I didn't want to be in this episode because I hate politics, but Mike, you just said, and I don't want to get into a tit for tat, but this was a headline I saw just as the show started. Trump apparently did a podcast with some Trump lover, of course. You only sit down with friendly audiences. And he blames Zelensky for the invasion. Zelensky should have never let the war start. So I don't know. People have this vision that Trump is protects America, but I just feel like he was dancing with the Saudi sheiks before the inauguration was packed up. And the fact that he blames Zelensky, I don't believe that this is someone who truly has anyone other than his own interests at heart.
And I think this is the problem with foreign policy in both candidates, and foreign policy in particular, well, with Trump, because you can't lump it all together and say he's good on foreign policy, because he's good on bits and bad on other bits and could be terrible on stuff, and we don't really know on other stuff. And all of that makes a ragbag of options, which makes it hard to say one way or the other that he's better or worse.
That's what I kind of feel like is, okay, so even if Harris goes out there and says Israel needs to calm down, if you have good Republicans, they can get out there and make the moral case, which is correct, which is right, and which I think has legs. If there's a sense of who knows what this person's going to do, I mean, I don't know, amorality. Dr. Binswanger said something like, the Republican Party is alien to him now. And I just feel the same way.
Well, he must feel the same way about the Democrats in America now. I mean, that's a party that has completely lost its way. I mean, they had the largest Hamas demonstration, pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian Hamas, globalized jihad demonstration at the Democratic National Convention. Can you guys imagine that? The Democratic National Convention allowed the staging of the largest pro-terrorist protest in America.
I mean, given what's taught in American universities, I guess I'm not so surprised.
Yeah, but the DNC didn't denounce it. And Kamala certainly didn't denounce it. And I agree with you. I have a problem believing, frankly, that Trump would have allowed the buildup of troops along the Ukrainian border and done what Biden did, which says this was an exercise. If you remember back then, Biden got up there and said, this is just an exercise. So when they invaded, it became, oh, shit, we missed our chance. Of course, they knew it wasn't just an exercise. But I don't know what Trump would have done. And I agree with you, Jonathan. I really do. On balance, though, I think the DNC and I think the Democrats do not believe in America. And I don't think we don't have enough Republicans. We don't even have enough Democrats like Fetterman and so on, who get up there and say, you don't have to be pro-Israel to realize that you should support a Western democracy, Western-like democracy, then versus terrorists. I mean, it doesn't take any sort of anything to understand who was right and wrong. Zelensky, we can get into that later. Of course, what Russia is doing is absurd, and it's horrendous, and we know what Putin wants.
Yeah, and the point here that unfortunately in these kind of elections, ideas are always take the back seat if they appear at all at the party, don't they? And unfortunately, the only ideas that I've seen spelled out is Kamala's equities idea. The stuff she puts on Facebook, the little videos of showing how you had to bring down the guy on top, because otherwise the guy on top or the bottom can be asked to take the reins of his own life, is not going to achieve as much as somebody who goes out there and works out for it. So this is the kind of ideology that I've seen pushed, and it's terrible.
That is old news. That is the same old Obama's. You didn't build that. We're all in it together. I mean, that is to me just the same old collectivists, and they have to say that. I mean, everyone shits on the rich, including Trump. Trump is not a big fan of the rich, and he's talks about hedge fund guys getting away with murder. So I don't know. Kamala's collectivism, just like run of the mill to me. There's nothing exceptional about it.
It's like they're safely sitting in the comfort zone of describing the culture today, isn't it? With sorts of comments like that, for sure.
And the Republicans used to give some lips. That's the thing. I mean, Michael, I get what you're saying, but the problem is the Republicans are the party of capitalism. They wave that banner. They say, oh, Kamala's a socialist, Kamala's a this. And the implication, of course, is they're capitalist with their tariffs and their controls and their religious thing and their abortion ban. I mean,
and that's a tragedy, isn't it? Because nobody anymore makes the moral argument for capitalism. And that's what's lost in the debate, isn't it? The fact that America, for crying out loud, you got great countries which based on individual rights and the protection of it. That's why it's not a democracy. That's why it's a republic. It's not supposed to be the mob, the rule of the mob. It's not supposed to be a democracy that can decide, let's put a dictator in power. And people don't realize that. It's such a shame. And what's more devastating, that the people who are the candidate are not very familiar with the Constitution. And that's depressing.
I think one of the things that particularly strikes me is that in this world that's devoid of ideas, in this debate that's devoid of ideas, the one concrete that people latch onto that definitely is right is the energy independence. Because not only does that affect like things like Iran and relationships with foreign countries, but it also affects things like inflation and the economy of the US generally. So although that's not an ideology, that's an isolated concrete, isolated example of something, isolated policy, same as all of their other random sets of policies, it is one with a lot of implications to it, all of which would seem to be good. And in this desert of ideas, that's one thing which you can get behind. I'm not saying that's enough to swing it. I'm not saying that's a deciding point, but that's the best kind of policy you have at the moment.
Can I just throw out a little devil's advocate as well? I mean, energy independence. Energy independence. Who couldn't love energy independence? To me, it is that same like nativist idea of everything you use has to be produced right there with you. Look, if it's cheaper to import energy to a place, why wouldn't you import it? I mean, I don't see any inherent, Dr. Binswanger has an article in here about Buy American is un-American. Trump's whole thing is we've got to you can only hire an American to do things. If you hire a foreigner, it's somehow like you're hurting people, you're hurting the greater good. So this whole idea, we have to be energy independent. I don't know, do we? If it's cheaper to make TVs?
Yeah, but I think I take your point, and I actually agree with you. But I'll add, I think we have to be more medically independent, say from China, because the problem you have is that the nice thing about energy independence, if you need it, is you can get it. The problem with importing energy is it's great until the importer says no, or they jack up the price. And this is exactly what we had during the Carter era, the disaster with the oil embargo, with the OPEC countries putting a kibosh on everything. We were suddenly strangled. It was a problem when China starts to threaten our medical drug supply, that many medicines in America are made in China and they're shipped over here. And if China says tomorrow, we're not shipping them anymore because in China they don't need.
And Michael, your answer is industrial policy?
No, my answer is to make sure that you have the ability to do independence if you need to have it as a definite backup. And of course, the market should. I'm a huge free market person, but remember, the word free market implies the market is free to do what it wants, not under the influence of, say, a communist China or the Ayatollahs in Iran or the crazies in Venezuela who are running their state oil companies.
So because they control, we have to also have controls as well. Is that it?
We have to have a backup plan. I couldn't agree with you more. If I can get medicines cheaper from China, I'm telling my patients, go buy the medicines, get them from China, man. But if China tomorrow says you can't have insulin as a pressure point on America, I want to be able to tell them, good, we've got it.
I think the issue with energy is a bit different. It's not like a car that you can buy a car from Europe or wherever because it's cheaper. Energy, unfortunately, most of the gas and the oil is under the feet of people who hate us. So the moment we get them, we trade with them, we effectively empower them. And that's the problem with it. That's why an independent America is an America which doesn't have to deal with those terrorist people, with those people who want to destroy us and are quite happy to make money out of us and in order to reinvest it, in order to attack us. So sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Jonathan. Don't worry.
No. I mean, I don't know. This is, you know, we're supposed to be talking about the, you know, our producer highlights here that, you know, his analysis is that we're arguing for statism. I don't know what element of that necessarily, but, you know, interesting discussions. I don't know. I mean, we're talking about the interviews. We're talking about, we all agree that there's no advocates for individual rights or capitalism. I would disagree that we need a backup that to the free market, but that's probably something for another discussion. We're talking about voting and if and who you should vote for this cycle.
Now, this might have been my fault in part, but using the lazy phrase energy independence, what I mean is making sure that you are using the resources that exist below your ground. You're not cancelling them for environmental reasons or for other reasons. You're not cancelling pipelines whilst, you know, allowing pipelines in Europe or advocating for pipelines from Russia, etc., that kind of thing.
And that's part of the problem, isn't it? You have access to energy, so if a company wants to extract it, let them do it. Don't stop them. The problem is,
yeah, it's like a package deal. Energy independence includes everything from deregulation of oil. We're all down with that, and Trump tariff man's 100,000% tariffs on whatever the fuck he feels like.
Yeah, sure. So freedom for companies to exploit the resources, to make use of, to get it out the ground from under America, and to effectively, for the knock-on impact of that, to affect every business and home in the land. That's got to be a good thing if government gets out the way. That's what we're arguing for, government getting out the way, not government getting in the way compared with other countries.
Including tariffs. Tariffs are government getting in the way.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Let the market, to the extent possible, let the market do it. I do believe there should be, and I apologize for this, but I do believe there should be restrictions on how dirty things can be. I think a short-term policy of let's drill the shit out of the land and pollute the heck out of it and dump stuff. I mean, none of us really want that. That's not sustainable. I mean, that's part of, there has to be a little bit of a long-term, but there's no question the America and Western Europe is cleaner in all this stuff than Venezuela or all the other places we're buying oil now, where the Democrats claim they're putting all these restrictions because it's all economic policy. It's all part of their climate policy. Can I just switch gears for 1 second? Because I know we're supposed to talk about the debate, but you guys brought it up, so I have to bring it up. There is a huge problem, and I think Ayn Rand said a lot that Jonathan and you guys can probably, Marco and Richard can probably quote them directly, but American businessmen have failed to support themselves. We had, if you remember back, Jamie Dimon got in front of Congress and he was tortured, and he was asked, why is it that he makes something like 360 times the average salary of the worker at JP Morgan Chase? Now, it's a bit ironic to now that's, of course, a great soundbite for a congressperson, because that sounds really good, except when you think JP Morgan Chase is one of the largest banks in the world. So what relevance does a worker at JP Morgan Chase have to do with an average person, even in America, never mind global citizen or whatever crap you want to spew? My point is, he could not enunciate an answer. And the fact that one of the men that's paid the highest salaries in America and the world, who for actually working, for having a position, could not enunciate why a banker who creates value, and the job of a bank is to make money, to lend money and make money, couldn't enunciate this, is really, I think, the title of the problem with capitalism in America. And a lot of what we talked about here, frankly, you are right. Neither side has understood or has enunciated that the business of America is business, and the success and the wealth of nations, which Adam Smith knew a long time ago, right, is because of businesses. Government creates no wealth, right? It only redistributes wealth. So I bring that up because it goes back to where I think we ended up, which is both candidates suck. Pick your poison or don't vote, which is kind of where I feel like I'm still voting, I'm still voting for Trump, obviously. I'm voting in Florida, so it makes no difference, but I am going to vote. If I used to be a citizen of Massachusetts, it wouldn't matter here either. They're all voting for Harris, pretty much. But I do think we should talk about this at some point, that the poor state of business in America, because it's a philosophical disaster.
But that's what I find a relief. No one would confuse Kamala Harris as a business person, spokesman for business, but like that's Trump's whole modus operandi. He stands, and I mean, is this who we want as, I mean, forget even as objectivists, is this who you want as an individual, not speaking you, Michael, but any of you, to hold up as this is the businessman. I mean, Trump, there's a lot to talk about, but there's a long history of unpaid bills with Donald Trump. John Allison, who is an objectivist, he wrote a book about the financial crisis. He's spoken at many OCON events. Donald Trump asked John Allison, successful banker for BB&T, I believe, to interview as his Treasury Secretary. John Allison at least told me at an OCON that he wouldn't do it. He did not want anything to do with Trump. I guess I'm not surprised why. That's why I feel there's a relief in having Harris. No one's going to confuse her as a capitalist. But Trump, they're going to say, see, this is capitalism, tariffs, and all the BS that comes along with it. Sorry.
Let me do a couple of the super chats. We've got one from Alex. Thank you very much, Alex, who said the difference between Donald Trump and Harris is the difference between virile and parasitic. Viral and parasitic. Trump is a viral infection you can survive, whereas Harris' mindset is parasitic to human thriving. So thank you very much, Alex, for that. And I think we had a second one from Ginger, which I haven't read yet, which I shall read now, which is thank you, Ginger, who said, agreed, Michael. I'd be so embarrassed to have the twit, I assume you mean Harris in that sense, representing us on the world stage, but wild-haired Trump is a dictator lover. And I think that's a lot of the difficulty that we're facing here. The two types of poison accurately identified, probably in that comparison. I think one of the things that we have drifted away from the debate itself, and we've talked rather generally about it. But I wonder if that's a feature of the fact that these kind of debates or interviews are frankly irrelevant at this stage. We know who Trump is. Harris has been vice president for for this entire term. And if we don't know who she is by now, that's kind of on her, isn't it? It's not because of debates or whatever. So is it irrelevant how they perform at this stage, unless they have a crash and burn moment, a proper, moment in front of the cameras, which defines the election, which is probably unlikely, given they've both had a certain amount of media training beforehand, whether Trump's reluctant to or Harris can't remember hers beyond the sound bites, who knows? But, are the debates irrelevant? Are people's opinions really made up by now? I mean, I do notice that in the coverage of this, particularly here in the UK, I noticed that despite the euphoria of the BBC and people like them when Harris took over back in August, the articles now have a distinctly different flavour. Here was a headline from one of the articles from a few days ago. Harris started, quote, like a rocket in Michigan. Now she's facing headwinds. Now that does suggest that, and Michigan being obviously, the Muslim vote, Dearborn, all of that, which we discussed on other episodes, there is a sense from this side of the pond that Harris's her peak has come and gone, and now things are looking more in Trump's favor, but only just. And of course, there's all the margin of error and all that kind of stuff, and there's always whether people are prepared to lie to pollsters and all that kind of thing, but. How do we assess debates in this? Are debates irrelevant, Jonathan?
I have to say, I hate the emphasis that's put on debates because, I hate debate. I'm not that quick. I'm not like always ready with a snappy line. And what it ends up being is just they've got their talking points. Of course, that's communication. You've got what you want to say. So it doesn't matter what Brett Baer asked. It doesn't matter what the Univision guy asks. They're there to say what they're going to say. And, what I resent the fact that you kind of get a bump from kind of like a fancy one-liner or something, like the things people choose to care about just bewildering to me. The fact that someone's clever quickly in a debate environment, like, is that the test of a good leader? But to your gentleman's point, I follow the prediction market, and Trump's leading right now. He's got about 55%, Harris 49%. So this is going to be really, really close. And to your point, it seems like people's minds are made up. So it's going to be that small sliver that sees where the hammer falls.
Michael, how do you see this kind of interviews and debates?
I have a great deal of trouble watching them. I think I've said on here before, they are really targeted to, American average education is 5th grade or 6th grade. That's the average in this country, the median in this country. And if you want to get to the 75th percentile and below, which is probably what they're thinking, you're probably talking about someone who's in late high school or 17 years old or younger. That's the level of education that you're talking to if you want to get most of the American population. And that's before the higher people, and I'm not trying to be cynical here, that's before we stop teaching history and facts and truth, and 1 + 1 is always 2, and there's nothing you can do about it, and there's no such thing as a personal truth, and your opinion doesn't matter if it's stupid. We don't, and I'm being serious, because what's happened is these debates, as Jonathan said, they've been about quips, they've been about fast, clever responses. There's no point in philosophy. I talk to friends and I say, wait a minute, you believe that? I said, well, tell me the philosophy that's based on. Well, I feel bad for people. You guys know all this because we've studied altruism a lot. But the problem with debates is they're very hard for me to watch. I usually last about 2 minutes. Kamala starts with her word salad, really. And you're like, she said nothing. And believe me, I have plenty of meetings in my companies where they talk for 10 minutes and say nothing. And I stop them, and I'm allowed to interrupt and tell them, move on, or you're out of the room. But I can't with her. And, Trump gets up there and it's huffing and puffing and blow your house down. And it's nothing of any importance. I mean, there's just all this kind of, and it could change tomorrow. It'll have the same energy level with Trump. And I understand that. And it could be a completely opposite viewpoint tomorrow, but with the same fervor and the same MAGA hat. So I'm with you.
That's exactly it. Like, Kamala, what her perspective is going to be. And we have answers to all of that. Why you shouldn't sacrifice for the poor, why billionaires are good. Like, we have answers to that. But when when there is no morality, when it's whatever you feel like with the winds of the moment.
But Jonathan, you're assuming she has some morality and it's just one direction. I think I don't agree with you. I think she has nothing. I think she is complete. I think she's an exact product of what the universities have tried to create. A mush. She's nothing. And she doesn't believe in herself. Her answer was, that's a very important question. Well, no shit, Sherlock. That's why we have it on the debate. All of these questions are very important. And yes, when somebody's kid dies because an illegal immigrant comes in and murders them, that does reach the level of important. You're right, Kamala. Good thing you're going to be the president of the United States. I really want someone with your intellect in there. Trump, he's going there like, blow the motherfucker away. I'm sorry about the language. But and by the way, if they're not guilty, that's okay too, because you have to kill a few good people in the bad, and that is the wrong. It's stereotyped. It's almost cartoonish if it weren't so serious. But I guess I see Trump as believing in America, or believing in Trump's version of America. And I think Kamala is anti-American. I truly believe she does not like this country. I don't believe that Obama likes this country. And I certainly don't believe I think Biden might actually have loved the country when he was astute enough to do it. But I have not heard anything out of Kamala's mouth that thanked the people who have made this country great, from the founders all the way up to the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezoses and the people, you and me and everybody else, who's actually paid our taxes, created jobs, created new medicines, created great technology. We never heard a thank you from her or anybody else in her party, except maybe Fetterman and maybe 1 or 2 others.
Yeah, we are coming towards the end of the time. But chiming on what Michael was talking about earlier on, about the businessmen being the people who don't defend themselves, it's quite poignant that the last live speech that Ayn Rand made was to a bunch of businessmen, and it was the sanction of the victim, where she was actually saying, you guys should stand up for what you're doing because you are the motive power of America. You are the motive power of the whole civilization, which rests on what you produce. Yet you accept the fact that you are the source of all problems. And that's absolutely an injustice, in the sense that you should have the recognition of what you actually do.
And you know, America had a businessman as president from 1929 to 1933. Herbert Hoover was an inexperienced politician with not a lot of experience, businessman who, in my opinion, this is an objectivism certainly, but turned a recession into the Great Depression because of, among other things, tariffs. So, yeah, TBD, as they say, TBD.
We have a last minute super chat from Alex, who is testing my reading skills. So let me see if I can get this in one go. Kamala needs to be, because to be is being. To be ever been is to be Kamala, being what has been.
And this is a very important super chat. So thank you for doing the super chat, because it's very important to have this kind of super chats, which are very important.
And what is also important is understanding the principles behind America and its constitution, which is why I put in a plug for James Valiant's course in an hour's time, a principled analysis of the US Constitution. And we wish only that the two candidates in question could attend that course and understand it a little better, because it benefits everybody in the civilized world to do so. But let's go around the house one more time. Tell me your final thoughts, Jonathan, and where people can find you.
Sure. Well, just want to give applause or ups to Marco and Richard doing double duty today on the channel, and thank you, like Bonnie and Gail, WB and Teneribus, El Rito, Jesse, all of you people who support us every month. It makes such a big deal. So thank you for doing that. And if you want to learn about America, read what Miss Rand said about America, a new textbook of Americanism. It's available at Amazon. It's not very expensive. And this is the radical philosophy. It's not Obama, it's not Trump, it's not Harris. Miss Rand had the perspective you should learn, so pick it up.
Yeah, Michael?
Yeah, I would just say, when you go out next time in a city and look at the skyscrapers, and she describes this so well, and I think both the Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, I do this and this happens to me. You look up and you think somebody had to think of all this stuff. And then a physicist and an engineer had to come together and understand what it took. And then a material scientist had to put together, and so on and so forth. And it was the mind of human beings, the mind, not the feelings, the mind, that allowed this to occur. The artistic beauty of this comes from the feelings, for sure. But without the brains and the belief in laws of physics and engineering and so on, we wouldn't have any of that. Next time you're in a hospital, I hope you're not, but unfortunately, most of us will end up there at some point. Look around you. It's all because of the brains of people and getting it wrong, getting it right, and back and forth. It is. I personally am an optimist. Obviously, I am thrilled with how humanity has done. I want to see us all succeed, and I thank you all for this is a great discussion. I like the back and forth. It was terrific. You can find me on LinkedIn, 2Fs Kaufman. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, gentlemen, for a lively debate and a good session. So thanks a lot. And please join us tomorrow on this channel for the Daily Objective and the reality show. And you can check out the other channel to this, the Briefly Objective, with the short videos from this one, edited with really get to the bite-sized elements of what we're talking about in these kind of debates. So thank you very much, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.